Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker. Now, what really happened in this fight? One of the best fights of the year, an absolute war, but mostly for the first 3 rounds. Also to take note, Dustin Poirier was recovering pretty extraordinarily between rounds. I mean, the guy would get beat up at the end of the second round, come out in the third like the second round never happened. While Dan Hooker came out into the third round completely gassed out and he just wasn't recovering. This could be because of the difference in experience with 5-round fights and fighting champions and going through wars like this. Dustin Poirier's done this many times, right? He's gone through 5 rounds, he's fought these wars, and it could just be he has better cardio in general. It was a huge factor in this fight because the beating he took at the end of the second round, most fighters would not be the same guy coming into the third, right? 1 minute after, while he was way fresher than Dan Hooker. After that second round, looked like Dan Hooker never recovered. Dan Hooker won the first 2 rounds and Dustin Poirier won the last 3, where it looked like Dustin Poirier was feeling out that first round more than anything, and then when he started to get tagged a bit, then he had to amp it up, because for the majority of the first round, he was just countering and moving away and trying to find openings in Dan Hooker, and what he did find was Dan Hooker was consistently throwing a jab moving backwards. That was his main countering and keeping away weapon. But 1 minute and 25 seconds into the first round, Dustin Poirier landed a pivoting left straight. And he did this when Dan Hooker was looking to post on him to keep him away. This pivot cross is allowing Dustin Poirier to circle his way inside of the post and land his left hand. This also worked when he started to use it against that counter jab of Dan Hooker. So you would have to know, if he can land a left straight like this, he can continue this combination. And what is something Dustin Poirier is known to do when he throws his left straight? You've seen it in almost all of his fights in the lightweight division. Left straight, switch steps, pause with his lead hand, which is now his left hand, to look and measure for the big right hand. And this switch step is also covering a lot of distance on the longer Dan Hooker. And what the switch step is also doing is taking away the angle of the jab for Dan Hooker. Right, he's looking for the jab on the southpaw Dustin Poirier. The switch takes off that angle and causes it to miss most of the time, allowing Dustin Poirier to land with the big right hand. And this switch step cross combo carried on for the rest of the fight, and is why the fight looked a lot closer after that first round. And there was something Dan Hooker was spamming in the fight. He constantly went to the same combination, almost like it's a video game where you keep using the same move, you know? And that is the 1 feint outstep 2B3 combination. Feinting with his lead hand, acting like he's gonna touch the glove or throw a jab, but he's making Dustin Poirier hand fight with him a bit to extend his own lead hand, so then Dan Hooker will take the outside step of the lead foot a lot easier and bypass now the occupy lead hand of Dustin Poirier. He knows that's not a threat anymore, right? They're in opposite stances. So he takes that step out and then he goes to the body. Dustin Poirier is known to use the Philly shell, and he tends to go with the high elbow guard on the right side. This does expose the body a bit, so what Dan Hooker goes for is the right straight to the body. He gets right under the guard, and why Dustin Poirier switches into parallel or brings his feet closer together when this right hand's coming to his body is simply because he's trying to block it with his left elbow. You're always taught in boxing, when someone's throwing a right straight to your body, you block it or deflect it by bringing your left elbow to the inside. And that's exactly what Dustin Poirier is looking to do, but what this also does is it positions him to square up his stance more to Dan Hooker because he's also moving backwards. It's very hard to block this body shot and move backwards without giving up your stance. He either has to reposition his stance, either going to parallel or orthodox or something, bring his legs closer together, or he's gonna have to eat the body shot and defend the next coming attack, which is the left hook. So because he's squaring up his stance by trying to block the body shot, he's opening himself up to the left hook. So it was actually a beautiful, masterful combination that Dan Hooker repeatedly went to. He kept spamming this combination to the point where it wasn't catching Poirier anymore. I mean, how many times you're going to see one combo before you get the hang of it, you know? And it wasn't enough to finish off Dustin Poirier, right? Dan Hooker wasn't able to deliver the damage that he probably wanted with this combination. And Dustin Poirier started to counter the naked leg kicks of Dan Hooker. He has experienced a bunch of kicks getting thrown at him, and he had to counter them when he fought Justin Gaethje, and he brought that experience into this fight. But for Dan Hooker, everything started crashing after that second round. He became a lot more hittable, and he got so much more tired that he was just a sitting target for a lot of the shots of Dustin Poirier. Poirier would just throw out jabs and left straights with no setup, and they would just catch him. Hands low. Even after getting caught, he would still keep his hands low, or he would try to fire back. He doesn't bring his hands back up, and he just keeps getting caught. The guy is just too tough for his own good. He has an amazing chin, but man, you do not want to rely on it. I mean, his hands were so low. When you look at 40 seconds left of the 5th round, I understand he is gassed out at this point. I understand Dan Hooker is just not himself anymore. He literally stands up, hands at his hips, mouth wide open, jaw hanging, and Dustin Poirier nearly clips his jaw clean and could have caused some damage here, you know? I mean, there was a point in the 3rd round where Dan Hooker is exhausted at this point. Poirier lands a naked left straight, switch steps forward to continue the combination, throws the big right hand. It misses as Dan Hooker is ducking under, and when Hooker looks to counter back, the punch was so slow, it looked so dramatic, it looked like a completely different fighter from the 2nd round. And it's not because Hooker thought Poirier was out of his range or anything, because he really wasn't that much. The only reason why Dan Hooker missed, 1, because he threw it slow, and 2, he got into a parallel stance. If he had an orthodox stance, this would have touched Dustin Poirier, and Poirier still had to even move his head to get the punch missing, you know? It was that close. He just did not have the gas, he just did not have the cardio, he did not have the speed anymore or the explosion in his punches. And Dustin Poirier did attempt a lot of takedowns, almost all of them were stuffed, but then when it came to the 4th round, there was that one takedown, I know you guys remember, where Dustin Poirier went for that double leg and it looked like Dan Hooker just sat down, like there was absolutely no resistance to it. And then off of that takedown, Dustin Poirier was able to get into that Khabib position. He was also getting his legs under Dan Hooker's to elevate him, and he saw that Dan Hooker couldn't get out of it. He didn't have the base to really get out of that. He had to scoot himself, but because he tries to scoot himself, he gets more flat to the cage. Dustin Poirier is able to work off of what Michael Bisping called the Dagestani handcuff, and Dustin Poirier was able to land some ground and pound shots off of that. It's crazy how Dustin Poirier is able to take the experiences of his past fights and bring it to this one. And then we look at the takedowns and the guillotine. Dan Hooker got a few takedowns in the fight, which impressed me a bit, right? I didn't expect him to get the amount of takedowns that he did, but Dustin Poirier did pull a guillotine on a lot of them. And there is something to take note. Dan Hooker was only able to hold down Dustin Poirier when Dustin Poirier went for the guillotine and got into his guard. So there was added effort from Dustin Poirier that made the fight stay on the ground a lot longer, but when Dustin Poirier didn't go for the guillotine, he got up so quickly every single time. It was very hard for Dan Hooker to control Dustin Poirier, which just shows how great Khabib's grappling is in comparison, you know? But then when we go to some of the moments of the fight here, we look at 4 minutes and 34 seconds of the 2nd round. Dustin Poirier is looking to get in on Dan Hooker, but Hooker actually meets Dustin Poirier head on, which is something he didn't normally do. It was a very rare occurrence, but it paid dividend for Dan Hooker, which tells you he probably should have went to this a lot more. He should have just fought Dustin Poirier head on more than just backing away off a jab. So Poirier goes and throws the left straight, and you know what he's going to look to do. He's going to look to switch forward. But Dan Hooker throws his own jab and gets his head off center line, gets his head to slip on the outside of the left straight, lowers his position and gets to a parallel stance, where Dustin Poirier actually does switch forward, but he can't go into orthodox. There's not enough space to move that much. So he settles in the parallel stance, and they're both looking to continue their attacks. Dustin Poirier goes for a right uppercut. As Dan Hooker's moving his head into it, Dustin Poirier's head is straight up as Dan Hooker attacks him with a right overhand. They both hit each other clean at the same time, but because Dan Hooker is more durable, he has a better chin, he was able to take the punch a lot better, where he continues his attack, where Dustin Poirier goes on defense, and he goes and pulls back on the left hand of Dan Hooker. And then we look at 3 minutes and 57 seconds of the 2nd round. Hooker has Dustin Poirier on the cage, and he has his left hand down to stop the knees from Dustin Poirier landing, because Dustin Poirier does have that right single collar up high. So what Dan Hooker tries to do is he tries to step in closer so the knee cannot land, but his left hand is still low, so when he steps in closer, Dustin Poirier uses that opening to attack with a very tight elbow on the inside and catches him with a hard left hand. Hits him with a right hook, but then Dan Hooker tries to answer back with straight shots, but Dustin Poirier is moving left, right, left, taking him off center line, causing the straights of Dan Hooker to miss. Hooker ducks under the right hook. Poirier weaves under for a lot of momentum into the left hook, which Hooker leans on, and Poirier's creating more momentum coming back for the big right hook over the top, and Hooker is able to pull back on the punch just enough. But again, you notice Hooker doesn't bring a tight guard up. It's just not a part of his natural game, it seems like. Off of this right hook, Dustin Poirier decides, okay, I'm gonna go for the takedown. He's right in close, goes for the single leg, which Dan Hooker easily defends. It looks like he's trying to go for a guillotine. Poirier's hand fighting right away, and Dan Hooker tries to find a knee in there. Poirier's able to shove him off and then continue on the cage, but now Hooker is on the attack. Goes right to the body. Right straight, left uppercut, gets in close on Poirier, sees an opening up the center, hits him with an uppercut, and then a left hook to the body. Then goes jab, right uppercut, left hook to the body again. He's mixing up his targets here, making it very confusing for Dustin Poirier's defense. But defense is the emphasis. Hooker goes and lands a jab, and Poirier just abandons defense and goes right into offense. Throws a huge right hook, which catches Dan Hooker so clean, anybody else who gets hit by this gets knocked out. This is full on haymaker to the jaw. Perfect position, perfect placement, perfect range, good form, all the power, and Hooker just stands on it and continues to attack. He throws a left straight, which misses because now again Poirier is going left and right, getting off the center line. He goes left hook, right hook, left hook again. The left hook lands clean, goes for a big right overhand, and Hooker's able to pull on that punch as well, making Poirier way overextend. From this situation, the only thing he can really follow up with is a takedown. He goes for a double leg, which again gets stuffed when Dan Hooker is able to get the double underhooks. And then we go to 38 seconds left of the second round. Poirier catches Hooker with a naked left straight. Hooker has his hands low and just does not defend it. But Hooker tries to counter back with a jab, which skids past Dustin Poirier because Dustin Poirier switched forward, taking off the angle. Poirier goes for the big right straight and it misses. So Hooker's firing right back. They're both right and close of each other, and they're both attacking with the same side punches. But the difference here is why Dan Hooker was able to get the better of Dustin Poirier is straight punches beat looping punches, and this is a perfect example of it. The punches that are tighter are going to get there first, they're going to land hard, they have a shorter distance to travel, and the shoulders are going to be able to block these looping hooks that are coming at the same time. And then we go to 14 seconds left of the second round. Dan Hooker goes for a left hook to the body and a right hook over the top. It gets blocked a bit because Dustin Poirier is able to hold the left post on the inside and the arm is cutting off the punch from following all the way through. Poirier knows the left hook is coming afterward, and you can see he tilts his head so the punch doesn't land to the jaw or to the temple or anything like that and kind of skid off. It's like it's water running down, you know? Decreases the impact of the blow. I don't necessarily recommend doing that. It's very dangerous to ever do that, especially when you have your right hand to block with, but it worked for him, I guess. And Hooker's of course going for the big right hand after his left hand, and Dustin Poirier is able to lean away from it. And because of the overextension, he sees the opportunity to go on the attack. Goes for a big left hook as Dan Hooker is weaving his way under. Dan Hooker with his hands low like always, gets caught by a big right hook. Hooker's not on the attack and he's trying to land with his left hand, and Dustin Poirier is able to get his right shoulder up, get his left hand up, and move away that direction, getting Dan Hooker to follow him so he can suddenly stop and surprise him with a big left straight. But it just misses as Dan Hooker's throwing his own jab. The accuracy was just not there. But regardless, again, Dan Hooker's hands are down as Dustin Poirier is winging a big right hook. Catches Dan Hooker clean on the jaw as he's going for his own big right hook, but Dustin Poirier's on it. He's a bit quicker in these exchanges. When they're going with the same kind of punches, Dustin Poirier seems to be a little bit faster than Dan Hooker. He's able to get his head under the punch, and they both commit for a big left hook and they both miss. Hooker throws a jab, Dustin Poirier ducks under it and moves out to his right and settles into southpaw again. This is really good from Dan Hooker. He goes and establishes a jab and holds it out there. Keeps some distance between him and Dustin Poirier because he's a little bit slower than Poirier. He has to use his reach. He's fighting in too close in a very speedy exchange. He's not going to win those. So he goes and extends a jab and causes Dustin Poirier to miss the left hook because Hooker's outside of his range. Hooker goes and throws a right hand which seems to connect to the back of the head of Dustin Poirier. Poirier tries to counter with the right hook which misses because Hooker's staying at his range. Notice where Dan Hooker's right hand is located. He's flaring out his right hand like he's gonna throw some big haymaker on that side, and Dustin Poirier picks up a left guard to block a hook. But Dan Hooker makes the punch a lot straighter than it looked like it was gonna be, right? He attacks inside instead of around. He doesn't make it a looping punch, and that catches Dustin Poirier on the inside, which showed right here. Dan Hooker won the exchange just because of this. Dustin Poirier is rocked at this point, gets hit by another left hook, another right hook behind the ear. He actually blocks the left hook, but still keeps his left hand low and gets caught right on the jaw with the right hook. And the left hook and the right hook lands after that. Hooker gets the tie plumb and lands a big knee, which is the biggest shot that Dan Hooker landed the entire fight. Rocks Dustin Poirier badly. Follow-up knee actually misses, but he gets caught clean by a left straight. You can probably say, if this second round carried on, Dan Hooker probably would have finished this fight. But the end of the round, and Dustin Poirier gets to breathe a bit, recover, and he recovered very well coming into the third round. And you have to know that this exchange probably gassed out Hooker so badly because after this, Hooker was not the same guy. He was much slower. He was getting caught by those naked punches like I talked about before. He just blew his wad at the end of the second round believing that he would knock out Dustin Poirier. But Poirier's been through this. He went through that war with Justin Gaethje. He went through a war with Eddie Alvarez. He's been 5 rounds a few times. This is where experience and cardio, it can absolutely change the dynamic of the entire fight. So I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. If you did, make sure to thumbs up. If you enjoyed my content, make sure to subscribe. Leave in the comments below what you guys think about the fight and who these two should be fighting next. Also, if you guys want to become a member, the join button is next to the subscribe button. If you want to see some vintage or older breakdowns, you can join and become a member. My next video is going to be the podcast. It's going to come up probably by Wednesday or Thursday. So be looking for that, and I'll see you guys then.